You're watching Fox 13's Good Day in high definition.
.02 is your time right now. It was an unexpectedly short day at the Casey Anthony trial. A legal issue forced court to end right after it got started. A dozen witnesses scheduled to testify were lined up in the courthouse, but Saturday morning got off to a shaky start with a debate over whether an expert for the defense would be allowed to testify. Apparently, prosecutors were not made aware of what he would be talking about. Joining us today to discuss all these twists and turns in the court proceedings is attorney Felix Vega.
Good morning again, Nerissa.
Good morning from the Hillsborough County State Attorney's Office. Okay, so let's get right into this. We were supposed to hear from Roy Kronk, the meter reader, yesterday. What happened there?
It was one of those days where the unexpected absolutely happened. In this case, like you were talking about, some issue came up behind closed doors in chambers that the press is really not being told about in full. It may have something to do with that witness that we were talking about last week. It may be, there were rumors circulating yesterday, it may be some sort of plea deal. We simply don't know what happened. But then again, it's a perfect example how in these trials, no matter how well you plan everything out, how many witnesses you have, how many exhibits that you have lined up and ready to go, any one thing can happen and throw off the entire schedule. That's where they're at now. And this is also, you have to wonder what the jury's thinking. They've been in and out of the courtroom. They were lined up to do a full day of testimony yesterday, and now they were sent home without anything. And it's like one of those things where what is going on and what is going to happen in the schedule is going to be the big question. And where is Roy Kronk in all this? He was supposed to testify yesterday. I know Sheena's probably a little disappointed. She wanted to hear from him. So it's going to be a big day on Monday to address not only the issues with that expert witness, but also getting the case to move forward and get on track again.
All right, well, let's talk about who did testify, who also testified this week. Cindy Anthony, we heard from Lee Anthony. Let's talk about Cindy first. She's now testifying. She was the one that did search for chloroform on the computer that they were talking about earlier. Now she's saying she was the one who left the pool ladder up for Casey to easily get to. There's a lot of talk right now that Cindy might be feeling for her daughter, Casey. And what's your take on that?
And that could happen, and she has been sitting in the trial listening to all this evidence being mounted against her daughter, first throughout the state's case, and then now she's being called as a defense witness to talk about whether or not the ladder was left up on the pool, whether or not Kaylee could get into the pool herself, and really kind of feeding into the whole accident theory of what happened to Kaylee Anthony. Now, is she actually lying, or is she stretching the truth, or trying to basically shift her testimony in a way that helps her daughter? That's a question that the jury is going to have to decide themselves. And no matter how many of us sit up here and talk about this case, or lawyers talk about it, or the court of public opinion talks about it, they're the ones that are going to have to decide whether or not she's telling the truth and what impact that's going to have on the testimony from the other experts. There was a huge battle of the experts all week long from the defense side of it, and also calling into question a lot of the state's evidence that was put on before we got to the defense's case.
Okay, we have to move quick because we're running out of time, but I do want to bring up Lee Anthony, because there was a lot of talk about him crying on the stand about not knowing about his sister's pregnancy. Can you talk quickly about that?
It was highly unusual to see him getting so upset about what was going on, that something that happened 3 years ago, and whether or not he started crying and his sister started crying. And again, it's one of those situations like, why are they doing this? Why are they putting him up here to
the motivation?
Get some emotion or get something out there that they're trying to get from him in terms of his motivation, or even show a different side of Casey Anthony.
Okay, let's get back to the some more of the law here. In the court of public opinion, when you're talking Facebook or Twitter, I mean, people are saying Casey's guilty. But we know there are specific rules that the jury has to follow. The judge is going to give them the rules. How does the jury have to vote in order to convict her here? And tell us again, how is the judge going to give these instructions about deliberating?
They're going to get specific instructions. We actually have a graphic we can pull up about some of the things they're going to have to consider. One, you can't feel sorry for anyone on either side. If you feel sorry for Casey, you feel sorry for Kaylee, that cannot be a factor in their deliberations. Also, we've heard about people talking about Jose Baez. Feelings about the lawyers should not influence their decisions as well. The verdict has to be unanimous. This is a key rule that they have to follow. In other words, if they think that she's guilty of first-degree murder, all 12 people have to agree to that. If they think she's guilty of a lesser included, all 12 people have to agree to that. So this is the thing. Are they going to get back in that jury room, be able to say, okay, we're going to agree on one theory about how Caylee Anthony died, and all 12 of us have to decide and vote and eventually go back out and give that verdict to the judge. Whether or not they're going to be able to do that with all the different theories going on in this case, that's another $1 million question.
Hard thing to do, to get 12 people to agree on anything.
Absolutely.
In any situation, let alone this. Okay, thank you so much, Felix. We want to know your questions out there. So again, we're going to ask you to post on my Facebook, Nerissa Prest, obviously, if you have any questions for Felix about this trial, and we'll get to them in the 8 o'clock hour. Just sticking around. Okay, thank you, Felix. On to it is the second time this week court was adjourned early. Things will start up again, as we said, tomorrow morning. And the questions just keep pouring in on our Facebook pages about this trial, and attorney Felix Vega is back to answer them for you. So, okay, let's get right to the first question, Felix.
All right, Nerissa.
It says, quote, can we pull that one up? There we go. It seems to me that Jose Baez, is deliberately messing up so he can get a mistrial. What do you think about that?
That's an interesting question. A lot of people have been very critical about Jose Baez's performance in this entire trial. It goes back to the state's case and whether or not he was effectively cross-examining witnesses, whether or not he was making the right objections or even knew proper legal arguments to make in this particular case. But then it's a fine line to say that someone is deliberately messing up to set up an appeal, because that brings up issues that could be dealt with by the Florida bar in the long run. And we heard Judge Perry has been very critical of him, talking about possible contempt charges at the end of the trial. But I think in this particular case, he's doing what he needs to do. And when you divvy up a case like this, the lawyers have already talked who's going to do what in the trial, who's going to do experts, who's going to do the regular witnesses. So these decisions have been made behind the scenes. So I don't think saying it's deliberate is really, people have to be very careful the words they choose. Critical of his performance, definitely yes. Whether or not he's throwing the trial, that's a whole other issue in and of itself. All
right, let's take another Facebook question right now. Will Cindy Anthony be charged with perjury since her testimony does not match up?
This is another good one, because when Cindy Anthony was actually testifying the other day and the prosecutors started cross-examining her and trying to lock her in on some of her testimony, and there was an exchange between Linda Drain Burdick and Cindy Anthony, and she said, well, why didn't you say this in your deposition? It's like, you never asked me. So the critical question is, what question was asked in a sworn statement prior to the trial? They have to go to her trial testimony, compare that against what she testified to before, and any sort of sworn statement that she gave in another proceeding. If those don't match up, or they know that she intentionally changed her testimony versus it was omitted or the question was never asked, those are two very different things that they have to look at in order to see if they're even going to charge her with perjury. And if they want to impeach her, in other words, question the testimony that she's given, that's a separate issue that the lawyers are free to do.
All right, keep those questions coming. Definitely, this is a lot of twists and turns in this case. Everybody's watching, everybody's commenting on this. I mean, this is not the first time a mother has been accused or convicted of, you know, killing her own.
No, it's not.
Susan Smith, and I mean, but I don't remember it being this drawn out and people paying so much attention to it.
Definitely the media attention, I think, in this particular case has been very intense. And we were talking yesterday, the last big media trial that we saw was back in 1995 with the O.J. Simpson trial. And I think now in this day and age, there's Facebook, there's Twitter, there's so much online coverage. You can get, the people are so glued in because they're so connected, and there's so many different ways to be connected. It's good to see because they're staying educated and they're actually paying attention to what's going on in the courts. I always think that's a very good thing for the public to do.
All right. Thank you very much, Felix Vega.
Thank you, Nerissa.
We've run out of time.